You ever read a story in the Bible, especially from the Old Testament, and get the feeling you're missing something? Like there's a secret key, and if you just had it, everything would suddenly click into place? Well, for a lot of these ancient stories, that key is real, and once you see it, it changes, well, everything. So let's dive in with maybe one of the weirdest requests in the entire Bible.
Okay, so picture this. There's this guy, Naaman. He's a top Syrian general, a real big shot, but he's got leprosy, which is just awful. He travels to Israel to see the prophet Elijah, and boom, he's miraculously healed. He's completely blown away. He declares that Yahweh, the God of Israel, is the one true God. But then, right as he's about to head home, he asks for something strange. He asks for dirt, and not just a little bit. He wants enough dirt to load up a whole caravan. So why in the world would a powerful general want to haul a bunch of foreign soil back home? It sounds nuts, right? But believe it or not, that bizarre request is our first clue.
You see, Naaman's strange request for dirt, it wasn't about geology. It was all about theology. It points to this foundational ancient idea, a concept we can call cosmic geography. And honestly, this was the main way people back then understood the spiritual layout of the entire world.
So what exactly is cosmic geography? Well, it's the idea that every nation had its own god, and that god's power was literally limited to its physical geographical turf. Think of it like spiritual property lines drawn on a map. If you were in Syria, you were on the turf of the god Rimmon. If you crossed over into Philistine territory, you were now on Dagon's turf. And if you were in Israel, well, that was Yahweh's land.
And this quote really gets to the heart of why this mattered so much. For the ancient Israelites, being inside Yahweh's land, inside the camp where his presence was, that meant safety. That was where you could be in a right relationship with him. But the moment you stepped outside those borders, whoa, that was a totally different story. You were stepping into hostile territory, a spiritual wilderness that they believed was the domain of other gods, maybe even demons. It was dangerous ground.
So let's circle back to Naaman and his dirt. With this idea of cosmic geography in mind, his request suddenly makes perfect sense, doesn't it? He'd just pledged his life to Yahweh, the God of Israel. But he had a huge problem. He was about to go back home to Syria, which was enemy spiritual territory. So what does he do? He asks for Israelite dirt so he can take a piece of Yahweh's holy ground with him. His plan was to build an altar on that soil, basically creating a little embassy for God's kingdom right there in Syria so he could worship the true God on the proper turf. It wasn't weird at all, it was deeply theological.
And here's where it gets really fun. Once you have this key, this idea of cosmic geography, you start seeing it pop up everywhere. It unlocks the meaning behind so many other stories that might have seemed a little confusing before.
Just look at how stark this contrast is. On one side, you have Yahweh's land. You've got the presence of God, safety, a place of right relationship. But on the other side, outside the land, you have the territory of other gods, the domain of demonic figures like Azazel. It's hostile, it's spiritually dangerous. For them, this wasn't just a metaphor, it was a fundamental reality of how the world worked.
Or take King David. When he's on the run, forced into exile among the Philistines, he cries out, "How am I going to pray to the Lord now?" Now, David isn't suddenly questioning if God is all-powerful or everywhere at once. No, he's crushed because he's been geographically cut off from God's land. He's stuck on enemy spiritual turf, and he feels like he can't properly worship from there. And then there's the awesome and kind of funny story of the Ark of the Covenant. So the Philistines capture it in battle, and in this massive power move, they stick it in the temple of their god, Dagon. Big mistake. The next morning, they find Dagon's statue has fallen flat on its face right in front of the ark. So they prop it back up. The morning after that, its head and hands are broken off. But here's the little detail we often miss. The story says that from then on, Dagon's priests refused to even step on that specific spot on the temple floor. Why? Because Yahweh had just invaded their temple and claimed that patch of ground as his own turf.
Okay, so for a huge chunk of the Old Testament, the name of the game is defending the borders of Yahweh's land. But when we flip over to the New Testament, the whole strategy gets turned on its head. It's not about defense anymore. It's about a divine invasion, a mission to reclaim all the nations of the world.
And that mission starts with an event we all know, Pentecost. We usually think of it as the cool miracle where everyone heard the apostles speaking in their own language. And yeah, it was that. But in the context of cosmic geography, it was so much more. This was the D-Day of a spiritual invasion. This was the official launch of God's mission to take back every nation on earth that was considered the turf of other gods.
I mean, just think about that list of nations in the book of Acts. It's not just a random roll call of people who happen to be in town. Not at all. That list is incredibly strategic. It starts in the east and methodically works its way west, basically checking off all the major regions of the world known to them from the ancient table of nations in the book of Genesis. It was a declaration. The reclamation project has begun, and we're covering the whole map.
So the early church wasn't just spreading a nice message of hope. They were on a mission. They were consciously and deliberately redrawing the spiritual map of the world, planting a flag for God's kingdom in territory that had been considered hostile for centuries.
And you can see this strategy playing out perfectly in the book of Acts. First, the gospel saturates all the Jewish territories, but then the Holy Spirit starts directing them to deliberately pick off key Gentile territories, places like Samaria and even Azotus, which was old Philistine land, Dagon's home turf. They are systematically reclaiming ground, following that divine pattern to the Jew first and then also to the Gentile.
And this whole cosmic reclamation project seems to culminate with one person, the Apostle Paul. Have you ever wondered why he was so obsessed with getting to Spain? Well, in the ancient mind, Spain, or Tarshish as they called it, was the literal end of the world. It was the final frontier. It was the last major region on that ancient world map from Genesis that hadn't been reached yet. Paul's mission to Spain wasn't just one last road trip. It was the capstone mission to complete the map, to make sure a flag for Jesus had been planted in every single known nation.
So, from a Syrian general's bizarre request for dirt to a globe-spanning mission of spiritual reclamation, this hidden map of cosmic geography shapes the entire biblical story. It reveals a God who isn't content to just own one little piece of holy real estate, but who is on a grand mission to reclaim every square inch of this world for his family. And that leaves us with a pretty powerful question to think about. If this mission is still going on, what territory is being reclaimed today?